And now, the plot thickens. Here is Stone Phillips.
Good evening. It's the kind of evidence that usually brings a criminal case to a quick end. The defendant caught on tape apparently planning and committing the crime. In tonight's story, there are plenty of tapes that show the accused man buying materials for and building a bomb and conspiring to commit murder. His alleged target, a man who calls himself America's toughest sheriff. But as you're about to see, the same tapes might also prove something very different, that the real victim was the accused man himself. Here's Josh Mankiewicz.
With guns drawn, a man who investigators say wanted to kill Sheriff Joe Arpaio is arrested. They say
it was a shocking assassination attempt, captured on videotape. A teenage felon released from prison exactly 1 day earlier, arrested in a murder-for-hire plot, accused of conspiring to knock off one of the most high-profile lawmen in the country.
Nobody is going to drive me out of this office.
The intended victim, Joe Arpaio, self-proclaimed toughest sheriff in America. He's famous in Phoenix, Arizona and beyond for dressing inmates in old-fashioned jailhouse stripes, working them in chain gangs, feeding them on the cheap with bologna sandwiches, and making them live in tents under the broiling desert sun. The plot: build a pipe bomb packed with ball bearings and blast the sheriff to kingdom come. The perp, James Seville, an 18-year-old who had just finished a stretch in prison for trying to blow up a high school, now caught on tape building the bomb and laughing about blowing away Sheriff Joe.
Look like dead sheriff. Yes, it does.
Seville had no idea that he'd been under surveillance the whole time, or that his accomplice was really an undercover detective, or that the detective, whom Seville knew only as Yancey, secretly recorded their conversations that day.
I mean, I'm a real pyro, but I do like blowing things up. It's about time I get paid for it.
Seville had been arrested at the tender age of 17 for breaking into his former high school and trying to blow it up. Now he talked about much bigger plans than just murdering the sheriff.
I was planning on doing some major damage to the city, because I figured, I could cause an LA riot in Phoenix there by taking out the power lines, the water. There's no phone, no electric, no power. I shoot somebody in the head. How are the police gonna know?
The two men drove all over town so Seville could buy bomb parts, a pipe, batteries, wire, BBs to serve as shrapnel, model rocket motors he planned to grind up for the explosive charge. Seville sounded like a pro.
I like to go to all different stores. Nothing's traceable.
Yancey asked repeatedly if Seville wanted to back out.
Okay, you sure you want to do this, right? Yeah. Okay, you don't want to back out or anything? Now's the time to do it.
So the two men came here, the Los Olivos Motel in downtown Phoenix. Detectives had wired a room with hidden cameras, and Seville was caught on tape building the bomb. Seville assembled everything except the explosive charge itself. Yancey paid him half the agreed-upon fee of $4,000 cash.
20, 40, 60, 85, $2,000.
Then the two men drove to a nearby restaurant where the sheriff's car was parked. Yancey asked Seville if he could kill the sheriff with a car bomb. Seville said sure.
Ask him just to put something under his car, okay? The radio detonator is a switch, okay? Gone. Now, well, you gonna do it with me? The other one doesn't work? Well, I guess we'll have to.
But instead, it was Seville who got taken down. Sheriff's deputies rushed the car and grabbed him. Even hours later, as Seville was being interrogated, he couldn't seem to believe it.
Next thing I know, there's 100 police officers and helicopter and everything. I'm up against the car and in another car, and I don't know what the hell happened. And
So that must tell you something, right?
yeah,
What's that tell you?
that I'm in deep.
A succinct assessment, because if anybody ever seemed to be convicted on tape, it was James Seville. Even his lawyer, Ulises Ferragut, couldn't deny the obvious.
A lot of criminal attorneys don't want to know whether their client did it.
and they don't ask. Did you ask?
Didn't need to. He did it. Jimmy Savile built a bomb. He was caught on tape building a bomb.
But soon Ferragut heard from his client an unbelievable story, that the mad bomber captured on audio and videotape was a fiction, an elaborate act, and that Savile went through with the bombing plot not because he wanted to, but because he felt he had to.
And I'm looking at him with skepticism saying, what are you talking about here? Let's get real. But as things began to unfold, we started being able to confirm the very things that Jimmy Savile was saying.
Lank, blank, bedraggled. On TV, James Savile looked every inch the guilty party. But what if this time, just this once, the obviously guilty guy was telling the truth?
Murder and the mob. Did he get an offer he couldn't refuse?
Would you tell Gotti, screw you, or Scarface or something like that? No.
You believed he was a mobster?
Yeah.
As the plot thickens. The plot thickens continues.
This arrest of James Savile had been in the works for as long as a week.
The arrest led every evening newscast in Phoenix. James Savile had been caught on tape building a bomb to blow up Sheriff Joe Arpaio, one of the most popular elected officials in Arizona.
He'll kill whoever opens it. It's better than a hitman. The hitman can get caught.
If ever there was an open and shut case, this seemed to be it. Yet Savile claimed he was an innocent man and trapped by others, acting under a death threat. Could he possibly be telling the truth?
Spending life in prison or being killed, I'd rather spend life in prison.
James Savile admits he set himself up for trouble years ago. Even though he had a strong aptitude for science and mechanics, he had trouble completing high school. Afterward, he had no direction at all. His single mom, Rebecca, couldn't keep track of him.
I had to be at work or we wouldn't be able to pay the mortgage. I pretty much had to let him try on his own to straighten up.
It didn't work.
And it didn't work.
In 1997, Savile and a friend broke into their old school, Maryvale High, hoping to steal science equipment and sell it.
We didn't think that far ahead because you didn't have anybody to sell it to, but...
So this was disorganized crime?
Yeah.
It got worse. The two boys lit a Bunsen burner in one room, then, without lighting them, turned on all the burners in the room next door, turning the building into a potential bomb. You know that turning gas on in one room and lighting a fire in the next room can produce a pretty sizable explosion.
We did it, but I wasn't thinking about actually the consequences of it,
Investigators would later say the school was moments from exploding and taking a couple of police officers with it when firefighters turned off the gas. Savile claims he never wanted to hurt anyone. He was just going along with his buddy. So, would I be correct in saying you're easily influenced?
Yeah, I guess.
Somebody urges you to do something even if it might not be the right thing. Maybe you go along even though you shouldn't.
Yeah.
James Savile was arrested and pleaded guilty to attempted arson. He received a 1.5-year sentence with most of the time in juvenile detention. But when Savile turned 18, the state of Arizona sent him to adult prison, where he met a man who would make his previous troubles seem like child's play. Thomas Morgan was 34. He'd spent a good portion of those years behind bars. In Savile's mind, Morgan was no common thug. His crimes were financial fraud, white-collar stuff. To an inmate like James Savile serving time for a stupid crime, that made Morgan someone special. You looked up to him?
Well, you had to. I mean, when you're sitting next to him, it's like the mouse next to a lion.
Savile says he was eager to impress Morgan, and one day he got the chance when he and the older man watched a TV show about bomb squads. Savile says Morgan asked him if he could diagram a bomb. How do you know how to draw a bomb?
It's not hard. I know how to diagram. I used to do electronic circuits, and I excel at science and math. I mean, basic chemistry will teach you anything you want to know.
Savile says he and Morgan talked about other things too, like their criminal cases, the judges and prosecutors who put them away. They also discussed Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
he started talking about the sheriff and asked me what the best way to kill him was. And, you know, we're just joking.
Well, is that something people joke about in prison?
Yeah, pretty much all the time.
But soon, Seville says, Morgan no longer seemed to be joking. Seville was getting out of prison in a week, and he says Morgan suggested he build a bomb and kill Arpaio.
Morgan told you that killing Sheriff Arpaio would make you a hero?
That's just one of the things he said.
Seville claims Morgan told him he could make a lot of money for killing Sheriff Joe. Seville says Morgan badgered him to call a man on the outside named Yancey. Seville says he was reluctant but finally gave in. And so from prison, he called a number Morgan gave him.
You say, I made the phone call, and he says what?
He says, you just joined the mob.
You just joined the mob?
Yes.
And what'd you think?
Oh.
Now Jimmy Seville's story veers from merely improbable to completely unbelievable. He claims Morgan now told him that he, Morgan, was a crime boss, and that Yancey was one of his button men.
That Yancey was Irish Mafia hitman, and Morgan was an Irish mobster that was Yancey's boss. I was supposed to meet Yancey and do what he told me to do.
Why couldn't you just say, the hell with you, I'm getting out of here in a little while and I don't want to be involved in anything like this?
All right, would you tell Gotti, screw you, or Scarface or something like that? No.
You believed he was a mobster?
Yeah.
Seville was released from prison on July 8, 1999, and met Yancey the next day. He says he was convinced he had to, or else.
So you gotta meet the sheriff. My whole family does. I hate that.
Was that all an act?
It was.
Seville claims that all the bravado you've heard on these tapes made the day of his arrest, all his talk of being an expert bomb maker and lone psycho, all of that was really a desperate attempt to impress Yancey and through him Morgan, two men Seville thought were mobsters, and in so doing, save his own skin.
You know, all apologies, but I think there's a case here that you were incredibly stupid.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, you know, you're thinking you're smart.
Yancey, he asked you flat out if you wanted to kill the sheriff, and you said yes. He said if you want to back out, now's the time, and you said you didn't want to.
See, there was other things there. I was told that there is no backing out.
Could Thomas Morgan possibly have had that kind of hold on Seville? And even if he did,
when you got out of prison, you're the guy that put the bomb components together, not him.
Yeah.
And you're the guy that got arrested for it.
Yeah.
And your defense is, it wasn't my idea, I was led to it by somebody else?
Yes.
But really, why should anyone believe Jimmy Seville? In order to do that, you have to believe that his cellmate, Thomas Morgan, cooked up a murder-for-hire plot, pressured Seville to go along, and even said he was a mobster to get Seville to comply. Under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and facing life in prison, Seville had every reason to concoct a story of entrapment. Even his own attorney was skeptical, except for one thing.
How many hours of conversations did the Sheriff's Department record between Thomas Morgan and Jimmy Seville?
Roughly 139 hours.
And as you'll see, those hours and hours of audio tape cast a whole new light on the story of James Seville.
A jailhouse snitch and a startling twist.
A person has been coerced and threatened and entrapped into committing a crime.
As the plot thickens. We continue now with Dateline and The Plot Thickens. Here again is Stone Phillips.
We've heard and seen the tapes that prosecutors say show James Seville building a bomb and conspiring to kill Phoenix Sheriff Joe Arpaio. But now let's look again through the eyes of the defense. Seville says those very same tapes prove that he is not guilty. Here again, Josh Mankiewicz.
Let's just say if for some reason you did Bob and Joe and you blow him up and kill him, what kind of a hero do you think he is?
You're listening to Thomas Morgan talking to his cellmate James Seville. At the time, Seville had no idea that investigators had bugged the cell. But now he claims the tapes bear out his story that he was entrapped, that his sensational televised arrest for the attempted murder of a famous lawman was really a setup.
Morgan was smooth. He had always the right line. In a matchup against, 18-year-old Jimmy Seville, there was really no contest.
Seville's lawyer, Ulises Ferragut, says Thomas Morgan had informed on cellmates before in order to trade information for better treatment from his jailers. But in Seville's case, he claims, Morgan didn't just snitch. Ferragut says Morgan actually made up the murder plot in order to finger Seville for it. He points to conversations like this one, in which Morgan seems to wake Seville out of a sound sleep to talk about murder. As the tape shows, Morgan brings up the sheriff. Morgan brings up a bomb. But Seville does mention sticking a pipe in his spokes, an apparent threat. Was Seville serious? Listen as the conversation continues.
What would be the best way to take it out? You still think a bag is probably the best way? What? Send me a bag. Do that thing. Make sure you keep the boy, knock him out. He was keep saying, dude,
Does that sound like a bad joke? Remember, Seville says he was joking, but Morgan doesn't seem to get it.
So you're sure the bomb sitting in the next bomb would be better than the pizza or worse than the pizza?
Just as Seville claimed, the tape shows Morgan also floated the idea of a murder for hire.
If someone paid you, blow up Joe, gave you a lot of money, you good? Who would pay you? I don't know. A lot of people.
Remember, Seville claims Morgan then told him of a guy who worked for Morgan on the outside, a man named Yancey, who would hire Seville for the murder. Seville says that Morgan told him Yancey was a hitman. What did Morgan really say?
He's reinforcement. Now you know the story. He's reinforcement.
And if Yancey was the informant,